So today we are swimming in a sea of data. Increasingly, we use products that generate more data, consume more data, and we just have an ever-growing amount of data that informs everything that we do and that also is impacted by everything that we do. But data on its own is, as we know, pretty useless until that data is indexed, right? So you index the data, then suddenly now you see a pattern. You see a dog, horse, cat. But what is this? It's a list of animals. Okay, but what does it mean? When you index the data, it becomes information, but then that information is really not useful until you give that information some context. So, oh, what are the animals that are most able to emotionally connect with humans? Oh, dogs, horses, cats. Oh, now we see that that information has some context and that it's now evolving into some sort of real knowledge of the world, right? But this knowledge also is not helpful at all to people until you apply this knowledge. So, you got married, you got your baby, you had your first child, and then you say, hey, honey, let's get a puppy, you know, because then they'll grow together. And then, what you're doing is you are now basically applying the knowledge that dogs have the ability to connect with humans. You're applying it to a real world situation to create some value, right? So now, it's a great time. Your little baby and your puppy, they bond and they play together. And suddenly, one day the baby falls sick, and you're a first-time parent. You don't know how to handle this. You panic. You call your veterinarian and you call your pediatrician, and you tell them, "Hey, what am I supposed to do?" And you basically separate the puppy and the baby just to be safe, because you don't know how the illness is going to affect. And both the pediatrician and the veterinarian tell you the same thing. Hey, as long as the baby and the puppy have got their shots, don't separate them. That'll cause separation anxiety. Think about it. You've got your everyday playmate and now you're separated from that, causes anxiety. So then you listen to them and you bring them together, and magically the baby recovers faster and all is well. So now what you've done is you have just acquired the ability to look at the world from another person's point of view. You have developed some empathy, right? So just recapping, you had data, you index the data, becomes information, you provide context to that information, becomes knowledge, you take that knowledge, you apply that knowledge, you have wisdom, then you have empathy, and then you are applying that wisdom along with the empathy in order to create value for someone other than yourself, i.e. you have now started to develop emotional intelligence. Most of us, of course, very different people have different levels of emotional intelligence, but those of us that, most people have some level of emotional intelligence, but we are mostly able to apply that emotional intelligence only one-on-one. Like, you go to work and you meet your friend Paul and he looks a little bit down, and you immediately pick that up and say, hey man, what's wrong? He says, man, I screwed up the database last. I'm just kidding, Paul. But
you knew about that.
So you're able to pick up the emotional state of the other person and then respond to it. So you apply your emotional intelligence, but most of us really only are able to do it more on a one-on-one basis, and we're not really, not most people are not experts at scaling this emotional intelligence. So how do you scale that emotional intelligence? How do you take all your knowledge and wisdom and empathy and package that in a way that can scale to the world? Like, how can you show empathy to a large number of people? Well, you build a story. So most writers will tell you that the way they build characters is they don't like an interesting character is basically a composite of many people that you've seen in real life. So most people are not like super interesting, but they have some interesting aspect to themselves. So you take that from this person, you take another interesting aspect from another person, and you keep on building this character. Then that character becomes a rich character with a backstory that you think about it, where did this person grow up, what was the childhood like, did they have siblings? Did they not have siblings? Siblings growing up? Did they have pets? Did they not have pets? Did they grow up in urban or rural area? Everything that you think up about the character is going to inform the way the character behaves, because our past experiences inform our future behavior largely, right? And this keeps on changing, and our attitude keeps on changing as we evolve through our life. But then that's what those characters are. And then you build a story, which is the arc of the character. So typically in a story, you have a world, and that world, it has something happens, and then that world gets turned upside down. And then is the hero's journey, as the protagonist in that story basically goes on a journey to try to fix that world. And when that protagonist goes on the journey, along the way, that protagonist meets different characters, and things change, and there's lots of elements to storytelling. But essentially what happens is that through that journey of that character, you not only see the world being transformed because of the character's extraordinary actions, but in the process, the character also is transformed by the situation. So in a good story, somewhere in the second act, the main goal of the character itself might change, so the character might be motivated by doing something, but then something else happens that then makes the character's goals evolve, and then that changes, right? So all of this stuff is basically, story is art, and art is story. Every piece of art has a story. Every piece of meaningful art has a story behind it, and it aims to shine the light on the human condition, to inform us about something more about human nature that we didn't know before. People aren't trying to make money in this world, honestly. People are trying to find meaning. This is the main goal of most people, every person, whether they know it or not. I mean, superficially, they might think, oh, success to me means this and this, and they might have other superficial, but at the heart of it all, we are all human, as human beings, living, thinking human beings with a prefrontal cortex and pattern recognition. We are all trying to find meaning. That is, that every one of us is functioning in a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, and we are constantly trying to solve that jigsaw puzzle. But what's happening is that as we go through the motions of our life, things aren't static, they are changing. We are changing, our understanding of concepts is changing, principles are being rewritten of life and of anything, physics, biology, everything is evolving. And so our understanding of things is changing. And in this changing world, we are trying to make sense of it all. And the best way for us to make sense of it all is by telling a story. Story is essentially the most efficient method of communicating meaning to people. Why is that? Because what stories do is stories skip through the assumptions and directly take a shortcut to depict a situation, which allows the audience to then recall a lot of things from their own life experience and then to paste them onto that situation, thereby making the complete picture. So I'll give you an example. Here's a non-story. What's a non-story? It's just information, right? So John walked 10 steps to the north, then turned and went 10 steps to the west, then knocked on the door 4 feet above the ground. This is unnecessary information, 4 feet above the ground. Then Jane opened the door at a 45-degree angle. John looked inside and, said to her, looked at her and blah, 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 blah. Like, this is a non-story. It's just piece of information, but it's not meaningful. Now, if you say, I mean, whether he went 10 steps or 5 steps doesn't really matter. If you just cut to the chase, and if you say, John was so distraught, he ran back to Jane to say, I'm sorry. This is a story now. Now, we all know that we all have gone through life situations where perhaps we've hurt somebody, or we regret doing something, and we have relationships and that we care for each other. And then once broken relationships take work to put back together, and therefore he's regretful, he's distraught, he goes back, perhaps they have a relationship, all of these things. So basically what we're doing is, by very short description of this thing, this one very short sentence actually communicates a whole world of meaning, which the writer knows and understands that every person in the audience is able to take stuff from their own life experiences, and paste those life experiences into the situation and immediately get much, much more meaning than the number of words that it took to convey that meaning, right? So story is essentially a profoundly more powerful medium of expression than anything else that we know. And this is why our urge to understand our surroundings, we're constantly moving through this life, solving this jigsaw puzzle, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. And the reason that we need to tell each other stories is because everything is moving around us. One person can't possibly know everything, can't possibly be updated about what's going on here and there. So when you meet somebody, you're constantly you're telling stories. Hey, you know what happened this morning? I went to the car wash and I blah, 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 this, that. So we're constantly telling each other stories and updating this scene memory of this moving jigsaw puzzle. And then what happens is that because we tell each other these stories, we are able to keep up with the stuff. And then these stories essentially are the basis of our future exploration of our lives. And so from the moment we are born till the moment we die, we're constantly telling each other stories, so that's what story is. And how is this all related to product? Where are we going with this? What happens with stories is that you have art and you have stories, and that those stories are communicated through every form of art. When you have stories that are communicated through a form of art, and you have multiple forms of art that intermingle and create a bigger picture, and that bigger construct is community, right? So let's take Asian culture, for example. You have some festival where you get together and you make a meal together and you eat together. So the way the meal is cooked, the way the meal is shared, the way the tapestry is designed, everything all has a context, and it builds a construct, and that is the sort of connective tissue for the community. And every form of art brings people together to form a community, and that community collectively has a worldview. Now, it may differ slightly from individual to individual, but there is also a collective worldview of a cultural a group of a community. That is culture. And then this culture is what we're through. When we build products, what we're doing is we're trying to encapsulate this culture and package it into a product so people can find it relatable. If you just throw numbers at them, they will just look at the numbers. I don't know what these numbers are, right? But if you provide the context and the emotional intelligence and everything, all of that stuff, then those numbers or that story really makes sense. And then people, enjoy using a product. For example, if you think of Instagram, TikTok, these are products that are highly cultural products. Why are they so sticky? The reason that they're sticky because they have gone through this entire process of really understanding what is it that humans want, and then to package that and deliver that through a product, and that's why they're sticky. So let's just do a quick recap, and we'll go to product design and how to apply this to product design. But essentially, you have data, you index that data, becomes information, you provide context to that information, becomes knowledge, you apply that knowledge, you have wisdom, you add empathy to that wisdom, get emotional intelligence, you take that emotional intelligence, you storify it, you have art, you take different forms of art and create a community, becomes culture.